Okay. So welcome everybody. My name is Jennifer. I am one of the counselors with the Employee Assistance Program. Just wanted to spend some time with you today to talk a little bit about mental wellness in the workplace. And we're just going to do an overview today. It's a big topic. There's probably some questions that we might have as follow-up after this. But I'm going to speak kind of generally to a lot of things that maybe are reminders or review for you, but also just good things to bring to the forefront as we're trying to deal with a delicate subject, not only on a personal level sometimes, but definitely in our manager or supervisory role, which brings a whole new flavor to it. As I mentioned, I'm a member of the Employee Assistance Program, and this is one of the services that we provide is to do some presentations in the community, either on a specific topic that you request, or in general, we do lunch and learns or different kinds of presentations that you might want to tap into or to encourage the people that you supervise to do so. And I wanted to start out just as a little overview on EAP. Again, hopefully a reminder, but also to remind you that it's more than just for individuals. It's also for you as leaders. So the Employee Assistance Program is a short-term counseling program and resource referral. It is available to all of your current employees and their household members. So a lot of times this trips people up. They will say, well, that person isn't under my insurance, so I didn't know if they could come. It has nothing to do with insurance. We are not billing through insurance at all. This is all contracted benefit for your employees. So if someone has a stepchild living in their home, or their mother-in-law is living in their home, or their college student is home for the summer or whatever, we really don't care about the relationship or if they're under your insurance or how that works. But if they're a member of your family in your household, they are more than welcome to receive the Employee Assistance Program. This also includes retirees or people who have left employment for whatever reason, sometimes maybe not of their choice, but obviously that's a time when you might really need some support if you, for whatever reason, are laid off or terminated from your job. Also, the support is available to leaders and supervisors. So on an individual basis, of course, to manage that whole work-life balance. Also, some coaching on skills on how to be a better leader and to deal with some of those messy boundary issues that sometimes happen, or maybe working with an employee that just really rubs you the wrong way. How to do that. Also some strategies maybe that could build your team or hopefully increase morale and reduce some of the squabbling or, I don't know, problems between employees that you might have. And in general, just to be a support to your entire organization. As I mentioned, it's a household benefit, and it can be available to individuals for individual counseling. It can also be for couples counseling, or to work with children. So we will see in counseling a child as young as 5. Generally, someone younger than that, we would help you connect with a pediatric specialist of some sort. And a lot of times it's not so much about working with that child, because maybe it's finding the resources within the school system or the community that already exist, but really coming around and supporting those parents who are dealing with a child who has something going on. So we'll get a parent who will call and say, you know, the school is reporting this, or I'm noticing this, and I'm just not even sure where to start. Should I get an assessment? Should I talk to a doctor? Do I go to see a counselor? Do I go to see a psychiatrist? Which ones are good in the community? All of these are questions that a lot of parents have that we can help you to try to navigate through existing things in the community, and also, as I mentioned, to give you that individual support. There is no cost for the Employee Assistance Program for any of the employees. There's no billing of insurance, and it's not anything that we're taking private pay for. I always like to remind people that it's a completely confidential service. So that means that between the client and the counselor, everything is private. It's also private, meaning that no one at your for imprint is going to know that you are utilizing that service unless you tell them. So we do report back to administration that it's being utilized, and we give them numbers so that they know that this is actually a good benefit that employees are appreciating and utilizing. But there's nothing that would be associated with your name or knowing how much or how often or that any member of your family has utilized the service. All of our counselors are licensed professionals. So we have professional counselors, social workers, family therapists, and also substance abuse specialists of varying degrees. And they have all been trained to work with really a variety of a lot of concerns that might be presenting to your employees. Most of the people that work in EAP have at least 15 years of experience in the field. So really can draw from a lot of experience with different kinds of people, but also a really good knowledge of community resources. So other ideas or avenues or things that we might be able to help connect people to. Scheduling an appointment is easy. You can contact us either with the 800 number. The 800 number, you actually get a live person who's local, but it is an 800 number. Or you can email us from our website and directly talk to an intake case manager. Either way, you can set up an appointment that would be in person. And for those of you who work in the Oshkosh area, there is an office in Oshkosh at the Mercy Hospital site. There is a clinic there. We also have a counselor who comes on site to your downtown office and to your DC center. So both of those would be options. We also have the option for people to have services virtually or by phone. And a lot of people really find that that's a very efficient way for them to connect with a counselor. They can do it from the privacy of their home or on their lunch break or in their car. It cuts down on transportation time if it's snowy or dark or got 4 other things you got to do tonight. It can really make things a lot more accessible. And also for some people, it really helps with that nervousness about coming into a counseling office or some of the stigma that's associated with that. They feel a little bit more anonymous or a little bit more confidential sometimes when they can dictate which space they're in. So these are all options that are available. Generally, the counseling sessions are about an hour. And people who receive this benefit have up to 8 sessions a year. I will tell you that most people don't even utilize all that. A lot of times, 2 or 3 sessions, people feel a lot better and are really, able to build some skills and turn some things around, get connected to good things. And then usually we'll be on more of a maintenance thing. So, every few months, they just kind of check in with somebody and have already then established that relationship. And they don't have to start all over and telling their story or, getting to know someone new. I encourage you to go to our website. We have a lot of resources that are there. We have a newsletter that we send out. We have a lot of connections on there to our website. Also our YouTube channel. We have lots of presentations that we do. We do lunch and learns, varying topics like this one. We also have a rest and relaxation session that we do monthly that is more of a chair yoga, stretch, and mindfulness experience. We have all kinds of really great things that are on our YouTube channel and linked within our website. So I'd encourage you to go and check those out. Probably some cool things that you didn't know were available. Today, I want to talk just a little bit about the prevalence of mental illness. We know that it affects a lot of people. And in fact, the World Health Organization has determined that depression is a leading cause of disability worldwide. So let that sink in for just a minute. Depression is one of the leading causes of disability. So as a community, we are recognizing this is something we need to address, but especially within organizations who are being proactive and progressive to try to create a really healthy workforce, that we're trying to increase knowledge and break down stigma and increase connectiveness to community resources. So today we're going to talk specifically, as I mentioned, about mental illness, but hopefully also what is your role as a leader and how can the EAP assist you as a leader to help your employees who might be struggling. So just to normalize this in general, national statistics tell us that about 1 in 5 adults experience symptoms of a mental illness. And that might seem kind of high to you, but you have to recognize that what they're saying here is that at some point they met criteria, for example, for depression or anxiety, or some sort of a post-traumatic stress. Of course, that doesn't mean that everyone goes to the doctor and actually gets diagnosis or treatment. That's just who is showing up in an office. So because of that, we think it's probably closer to 1 in 4 people, because not everyone would show up in these statistics, obviously. Usually about 1 in 25 is a person who's actually struggling with what we would consider a more severe and persistent mental illness. So this would be someone who has a long-term developmental disability, Alzheimer's disease, schizophrenia or another psychotic disorder, bipolar disorder, those that are going to need ongoing treatment and likely medication management. The thing to know about this is that we often don't know this status. You might be looking around going, oh, 1 in 5, so that's one of us. The reason we don't know is because a lot of people are living well in recovery. There are people who have experienced symptoms that get better with time, that access spiritual services, that access counseling services, that take some medications, that go through different kinds of group therapies or support groups or have different resources. There's all kinds of things that people do that help them learn to cope in a different way with whatever is presented to them. So obviously we don't always know, and we certainly don't have a sticker on our head that lets people know if we've ever struggled with mental illness. Statistically, the majority of people are struggling with anxiety, and I would say that that has been our experience in EAP in general. One of the primary reasons that people come to talk to us is struggling with anxiety, and secondarily is its brother, depression. So often anxiety and depression go hand in hand. That will actually be seeing a little bit of both going on. And then much less common that we would see the more severe mood disorders like bipolar disorder, personality disorders, and then, as I mentioned, people who have schizophrenia or other psychotic disorders. The reason that this is such a big deal is that persons who are experiencing mental health, it's not just affecting them, obviously. It's very much affecting the people that love them. It's affecting families. It's affecting communities. And we know that it's not just mental illness, that often substance abuse goes along with mental health. It's more of like a chicken and egg thing that we don't know. Did someone struggle with substance abuse and then they developed mental illness, or did they have mental illness and they turned to substances to cope? Yes, both, either or, all of those. We know that there's a high percentage of people who experience homelessness who also have mental health concerns, people who are incarcerated or in probation, having other legal issues that have mental health issues. We know that there's approximately, it's hard to quantify, but about $193 billion a year in lost earning to mental health. So this is counting the people who are unable to go to work or to fully work in their capacity because of mental health, either personally or a close family member that they need to take care of. And I'm sure as an employer, you're very familiar with this, of how often people are needing to take off of work or unable to perform the full duties of their job because of mental health things going on. And unfortunately, we also know that about 90% or higher of people who complete suicide have met criteria for a mental illness at the time that occurred. So the more that we can identify, the earlier, the sooner that we can intervene, hopefully we can reduce terrible statistics like that. So mental illness in general is a medical condition. And I think historically we had sort of this idea that mental health was from the neck up, and it was a mental thing that was separate from all other physical or what we call medical type illnesses. And thank goodness we've come to understand this is a more holistic thing. We know that if we are struggling with something that we might have termed medical, that it's obviously going to affect our mental health and vice versa. One of the interesting things is a lot of times people will first present to their primary care doctor with a mental health concern, but they don't present that way. They present with physical things. For example, having lots of headaches, having neck and body pain, having GI issues, so heartburn, stomach ache, nausea, being in the bathroom all the time, not being able to sleep, not being able to focus, all of these things that often are very much associated with anxiety and depression. So we know that these things go hand in hand, and it's important for us to acknowledge that mental illness is a condition that deserves our respect and is just as serious as any medical disorder that you might know of. New technology has helped us in really validating that, I think mostly for the individuals that experience it. But the way that we understand how, particularly with depression and anxiety, that if a person is struggling with symptoms for a pretty significant amount of time and it's not treated, it's not addressed, that there are parts of the brain structure that actually change. And there's parts of the brain that just aren't functioning the way that they should. And hence, that's why we see people who struggle with depression, for example, pulling back and just not being very social, not having much emotional expression, having very little interest in things, maybe not even physically going out and doing anything. So now we know through PET scans and CAT scans and MRIs that there is structural differences. You can see that with people who experience mood disorders like depression. We can also see it with people who are struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. We can see areas of the brain that are overactive in our like fight or flight responses. We can also see it in persons that are experiencing schizophrenia and different kinds of dementia disorders, that there are structural changes in the brain. Where does it come from? We don't exactly know all of that, but we have some ideas. One of the things that we know is that mental illness does tend to have a factor within families. So if you have a parent who has struggled with anxiety or depression, the likelihood that you as the child would experience anxiety or depression is higher, but it's not a one-to-one ratio. So that doesn't mean that you will. We also know that there are children who may have a mental health disorder that their parents have never had symptoms of that. So it isn't, always a one-to-one kind of thing. When we talk about genetics, we can also talk about what we call epigenetics. So it's more about what causes that DNA to turn on or turn off. So a lot of things like life events, trauma, personality, access to resources, access to supports, stressors, all kinds of things in our environment can cause certain things to activate or not, and they may be lying dormant for many years. So a lot of these things that it's hard for us always to understand, but we know that there are some people that might be more at risk. As I mentioned before, we know that medical conditions often can go along with mental illness. Sometimes they are deceiving to us because we aren't sure if we're seeing a mental health type thing or if this is more of a physical health disorder, or how do we discern that, or how are they interacting with each other? And we also know that lifestyle factors can affect it. So it doesn't mean that we won't have mental health concerns if we are very healthy, but we know that it will lessen the impact and that our resilience and ability to cope obviously is going to be better if we have better general health, if we have good sleep, if we have a safe environment to live in, if we have financial and other community resources to support us. We know that mental illness disrupts thinking, feeling, mood, relationships, functioning, really every aspect of an individual's life. So we can't just compartmentalize and say, oh, well, they're struggling with this. It comes out in every way. As I mentioned before, it can be physical pain and limitations, distractions and inability to follow through on projects and things that can affect our intellectual abilities, which obviously go into our jobs and our ability to function at our jobs. Just making good choices or not making good choices, for example, with finances, definitely changes our relationships, and even our spiritual lives are affected by mental health. And I can't stress enough that it's not just the individual who's experiencing mental illness that experiences distress. It's also the people that they live with, the people that care for them, and the people that work with them. Anyone who is a friend, family, community member, colleague, it can also impact them in the same way. So you might think about a situation where there's a loved one that you have had or a friend that you've known that has struggled. And, you also feel that concern. And then this overwhelming question of what do I do? How do I help? And not always knowing those answers. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of things available in the community, and especially in the Fox Valley and down to Oshkosh. We have an amazing amount of great resources for mental health, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to access. And in fact, it can be really, really overwhelming for people. So that's a place that EAP can come alongside people and try to help them find something that's covered by their insurance, or if they don't have insurance, or if they need financial assistance or whatever it is, we can try to connect them and hopefully to get them to the right level of care quickly, because that can also be overwhelming. People not even knowing where to start or who is it that would help them. And we hope then we can also be a gap filler. That we know right now behavioral health outpatient in general is about 5 to 6 months for the first appointment. Months, yes. So we have a great need in the community. And in the meantime, if we can help out with some short-term coping skills and reduce the risk of crisis, or get people the help that they need, whether they need counseling or not, or if we need to be that bridge until the time that they can get into counseling. Either way, these are options that EAP can offer to you. So how do we support people specifically in the workplace who might be dealing with mental health? I'm going to give you just a little scenario that we can go along with of the case of Bob, our coworker, and maybe somebody that you supervise. He's usually been a really good employee. He's always been working on time. He is usually in a good mood. He has good hygiene. He's ready to go when he comes to work, except for the last couple of weeks. All of a sudden, we're seeing that he's starting to come in late. He doesn't look so good. Sometimes he doesn't smell so good. He seems a lot more grumpy. We happen to know, because he shared with us, that he's going through some really big relationship differences. And we're starting to see that some of his performance is slipping. He's forgetting things. He's making mistakes. He's not very nice with his colleagues. People are kind of walking on eggshells and are just not really sure which Bob they're going to get when they come to work. And maybe you've known a Bob like this. So when we look at Bob, what can we know about him? Some of you might think, oh, for sure, there's a substance abuse thing, or maybe he's depressed. Maybe he's going through a hard time. Maybe he needs treatment of some sort. Could be. But the truth is that we really don't know. And you as a supervisor or you as a colleague, it is not your role to be diagnosing that. And it's really not your role to be telling Bob or anyone else that you think that's what's going on for them. So it's important that you be able to refer that person if you think there is something more going on, that they get to the trained professional that they need to go to. So whether that be to see a medical doctor, in-house if you utilize your clinic, or if working with EAP, if we can help you to determine whatever recommendation it might be. But it's very important that you are not making the determination as to what it is that they need. One thing that supervisors can do is to pull Bob aside or into your office in a private environment and to have a sometimes speech, which is, sometimes people go through things in life that really cause them a lot of problems, and they might be struggling a little bit more than usual. And to focus really on those performance things that you are seeing. So, these are some concerns. Specifically, you've been this much late. Specifically, you've called in this many times. Specifically, we've had this many things that you've, forgotten or not completed. We've heard a few times that you have not been kind to your colleagues. Very, definable things that we're seeing that we're concerned about. So an option is to refer Bob to see an EAP counselor. You can do this in two ways. You can do this voluntarily. So just suggesting that Bob would do that, and he might say, yeah, that's a great idea, I'm going to do that. Or you can also make it a mandatory referral, where you as the supervisor would call to our intake number and say, I have an employee that I am making this a condition of their performance plan that they would meet with a counselor. So then this would be a little bit different in terms of the confidentiality, because the individual would then be signing what we call a release of information, so that we could confirm back to you, the supervisor, that the person has attended the appointment. It also allows us to get some information from your perspective about kind of what's been going on and what you would like us to address with that individual. And then it allows us to help, determine what those next steps might be, to make some recommendations back of things that maybe could be done differently in terms of working with Bob, and or if there's more things that he needs on the personal side, then we can help connect him with those things. Because obviously, if there's stuff going on in his personal life, it's going to filter back into the workplace. So continuing with Bob, hopefully after a few weeks, we're going to see that there is some improvement, but he might still be struggling. So there may be opportunity for him to be eligible for family medical leave. It is something that is a condition that can be utilized for this benefit. Obviously, if the person has earned it under your HR laws, but being able to connect with your HR staff to make sure that you're talking through if this is something that might be useful to Bob or whoever. For some people, that means actually taking more of an extended time away to address mental health needs, or it might be on an intermittent basis that maybe their mental health symptoms are more episodic. So when they're not doing very well, that they could use that time, or maybe they need to come in later if they're really struggling with some insomnia or whatever it is that the doctor determines might be helpful to them and to use so that they can be more successful on the workplace. When Bob comes back, we need to make sure that we're asking him what he needs. If there's anything different, anything that we need to know from a professional standpoint to help him do his job. We're not going to ask him about his diagnosis. We're not going to ask him what meds he's on. We're not going to ask him how often he's going to counseling. Obviously, if he wants to share those things with you, he can, but to also caution him that, he also doesn't need to be sharing that really with anyone. He doesn't need to be sharing it with colleagues. That is private medical information. We want to make sure that we don't treat Bob any differently. So if he has mental health stuff, okay, we want to respect that and we care about him as an individual. But our job as a supervisor is to make sure that performance issues are still being addressed. So even if he does have a mental health issue, he still has the same expectations for his job unless he has a medical note of some sort that's approved by your HR that says that his job is somehow different. Some of the things that you can do to try to hopefully prevent or lessen some of the impact of mental health concerns in your workplace is to try as much as you can to connect people. And I know in this post-COVID world, that's really hard, especially if you have some of the people that you supervise that are remote. I think it can be even harder. And sometimes the job is just not conducive to a lot of time to get to know each other. But statistics tell us that if you have even one friend at your workplace, the likelihood that you are going to be happier with your job, that you are going to stay at your job, and that you will have better mental health is much higher. So don't underestimate those opportunities to have some fun or build some levity and some connection between the people that you supervise. It's really not about how many people they have to know. It's just having just even one person that they trust, that they enjoy working with, can really make a huge difference. So building and nurturing those opportunities for team connection whenever you can, trying to help people to build each other up, and trying to be open-minded and flexible within everybody, that we all have things that we're dealing with that are private, but that we're all welcome here and that we can all support each other in doing a good job. We always want to build a culture of health. So mental wellness is just one piece of hopefully a whole wellness message that you can communicate to your folks. So making sure that people are eating healthy foods, making sure that people are drinking water, not just soda, not just coffee, and hopefully not too many other substances when they're not at work. Promoting that they're getting sleep and rest. If there is nothing else that we can do, just making sure that people get rest and that people use their time off. And that starts with you as leaders role modeling this. That you're role modeling, that you're drinking water, you're role modeling that you take a break and go take a walk, that you get out and get some fresh air, that you use your time off, because yes, this job is important. And of course we need to respond to the times where we have, higher need or a rush time, whatever, but it's still a job. It is not our whole life. We need to make sure that we have the time and the energy to devote to things that are outside of work. And the more that we can see employees as whole people that have a whole life outside of what happens at work, the more they are going to feel appreciated and the more their attitude is going to improve. So a few things that you can do as a leader if you are struggling with your own stress, or you're getting stressed because you have to deal with an employee who is difficult for you, or if you have an employee who's struggling right here with you, one of the first things I always recommend is doing some breath work. Doesn't have to have any special equipment. You don't have to go anywhere special. It's with you all the time, but it is a really, really powerful thing that you can do in the moment to bring everything back down. So taking a moment just to practice a little bit of breathing and exhaling and being mindful in the moment can really change things. And if you have never done this, I would encourage you to try the 4-7-8 breathing. So you don't have to change the rate of your breathing, but you would inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and exhale for 8. And when you're exhaling for 8, you are trying to push out every bit of oxygen that's in your lungs. So it kind of almost feels like you're coughing at the end. But to slow that down. So this is a really amazing thing that stimulates our vagus nerve. So what happens, like if all of a sudden you are out driving and a deer runs in front of your car, you are going to immediately be able to respond to that. Your brain is going to say, oh, I got to stop. I got to get out of the way. You're going to react. If you're the driver, you're going to be stepping on the brake. You're going to be swerving. You don't have to slow down and tell your body what to do. It very quickly, your heart is going to increase. The blood to your muscles is going to increase. Your focus is going to zoom in on that deer and whatever it is that you need to keep yourself and whoever else is in the car safe. The very cool thing about that is that we can also hit that in reverse. So if we change the breathing by slowing it down, we are telling our body and our brain that there is not a danger. And often that's what's happening when we have anxiety or we have panic, is that our brain is reacting as if there is a deer running in front of our car or there is a bear chasing us. And so by slowing down the breathing, we're telling our body, no, it's okay. We don't need to panic. We can slow our thinking down. There is not an immediate danger here. This is something that I'm conjuring up as a danger that is not, and is extremely powerful. And it's something that you can do 2 or 3 rotations of and be really amazed. I would challenge you to try it on how different you feel and how you might approach things differently. I also always encourage people to open up their shoulders. So as a society right now, we are spending a lot of time with technology, either at a desk where we're kind of hunched over and leaning in, or over a keyboard, or we all have these wonderful little phones where nobody is holding it up like this, which would be really good for our neck and our back. What we do is we hunch over, and chiropractors are up in arms here because we are hurting our neck and our back, and we're having headaches, and we're even getting, thumb and hand cramps and all kinds of things that are happening because we are crunching in and we're crushing our lungs. So we are not bringing in full air. I would encourage you, do these things together. Pull your shoulders back. It feels amazing. And then do a couple of rounds of the 4-7-8 breathing. It really can make a difference. It's like all of a sudden all this oxygen comes to your brain and things seem like maybe they're going to be a little bit better. And it really reminds us that we, in general, have bad posture and we need to have better. Our body just functions better when we have good posture. Another visualization trick that you can use either with your employees or for yourself is this idea of a safe container or a box. So one thing that we have to sometimes be teaching our employees or reminding ourselves is that there are, boundaries between our personal life and our professional life. So for example, your employee's coming into work today and they get a call from school that something went on with their kid and they're having problems and the teacher needs to meet with you. And so all of these worries that are happening, when the employee gets to the workplace though, they need to be able to put those things in their safe box, up on a shelf over here, and leave that alone while they come in to focus at work. So that when work is done or when it's a break time, they can come over and then revisit that and be able to address whatever that home issue is. But while they're at work, they need to be focusing at work. And the same thing going the other way. So if there's a stressor, there's a meeting, you got chewed out at work, whatever, you screwed up something big, leaving those things in the work box when we come home, which is why a commute is nice, or that driveway time where we get to process like, okay, I am not at work anymore. Now I am coming into my home where I am a wife and a mom and a sister and a neighbor and a whatever, volunteer in the community, whatever we are. But it's that visualization that can be very powerful of that I'm separating this from this. And often I'm hearing from leaders that is happening to their employees, where there's a lot of personal life stuff that is causing distraction in the workplace and also causing emotional issues within the workplace. So sometimes teaching a little bit about how do we separate those things, and mentally that we cannot deal with all the things right now. So let's put it over here. Doesn't mean we won't. We will do it at a later point, not right now. So how do you support one of your employees or maybe a colleague that you're concerned might have something going on? First of all, as I mentioned before, you're not going to come out and say, hey, I think you have depression. You better go get help, or you seem bipolar. These will not be helpful to them. If it's something that they share with you, that's going on, you can listen. Be very careful to not be giving advice. But some of the signs that you may see, we've already talked about when we talked about Bob, but some things that just seem out of character and different to what you have known about that person. Just a reminder, if they do have a diagnosed mental health condition, it is protected under the ADA like any other medical condition. They are not required to disclose it in an interview. They're not required to disclose it in the workplace unless obviously they want to, or they're asking for an accommodation specifically for that. And if they decide to utilize family medical leave or whatever, they also do not have to let you know what the reason is. They just have to have a doctor's note specifically saying what it is that the accommodation needs to be. Just being a friend, you don't have to know a whole lot about mental illness. You don't have to have any answers. A lot of times people are not looking to you to fix things for them as much as they just want to be acknowledged. Just giving them a safe space to talk about what's going on. If they want to keep it private, that's their prerogative as well. You are not needing to be their counselor. You're just trying to be a helpful ear. And this is probably a little bit different when we're in a supervisory role because we want to clarify that, of course, we care about them as an individual, but we are also their boss, and we also need to make sure that they're doing their job. And if talking about their mental health regularly in the workplace is becoming an issue, that's not appropriate. Not that that isn't a real need for them. It's just not the time and the place. So it goes back to a little bit about the teaching and helping people to know some good boundaries and also to protect their own privacy. Sometimes people don't even realize that that's something that should be confidential. Trying to obviously address things privately and respecting their confidentiality whenever we talk about it, and always seeking first to understand and what is it that we can do. Some of the things that you might say to someone is, I've noticed that you just don't seem like yourself lately, or that you've been, seeming really tired, or that you, you just, I don't know, you're not eating or whatever. I don't know. Saying things like, can you just help me understand what's going on? I'm concerned about you, reflecting back what you're hearing, but always being ready. And I know this is always a scary thing to think about, but listening. And if someone is talking about not wanting to be here, wishing they were dead, saying that their family would be better off without them, things like that. If you are worried, saying that sometimes, sometimes people really struggle and they do have thoughts about that. Is that something that's going on for you? You are not going to put that idea into their head if it's not already there. But sometimes people will be really glad that you brought it up and that you were not afraid to ask them. And then obviously to get them the help that they need. In general, if people are making jokes about suicide, so there's been more commonly lately, people have been saying things like, they had to talk me off the ledge, or it was so bad, I thought I was going to kill myself, things like that. Some of this is an education that those are not funny things. Those are not appropriate. There's other ways to say, oh, I was really stressed out, or, I was really in a bad way. So some of it's an education for that individual to use a different way to express themselves. Also to understand that even if it doesn't bother them, it might be bothering other people who do have some experience with violence or suicide. But it's something that we don't joke about. And sometimes it's even just gestures. So, making a gun to your head or acting like you're cutting your throat, things like that. Sometimes people will joke about it, but it's nothing obviously to joke about. And if you have an employee that's doing that, I would take them aside and ask about that. Is there something more to this? Is there a grain of truth behind what they're saying? Why would they say something like that? Making sure that they're not thinking about hurting themselves. And if that's the case, then going into that education mode of, okay, let's make sure that we're not making jokes about hanging ourselves or whatever, and why that's not okay. If you have someone, though, who is in a crisis situation, that they are talking about hurting themselves or someone else, or they are physically experiencing symptoms that they are not going to be able to participate in work or be safe in the workplace or get themselves home safely, then calling 911 is what you need to do. And it would always be better for you to call emergency and have them make the assessment that things are okay than for you to not, and to have missed an opportunity when someone really needed help. Another thing that you can do is to call 998, which is a national suicide and crisis hotline. They can walk you through. You can sit with your employee right there and help them to talk to someone in the suicide hotline to make that assessment of if there's something more that we need to do. Do we need to call 911? Do we need to get them to an emergency room? Do we need to call their emergency contact? What is it that we need to do? Again, taking this off you as a leader, that you get them the appropriate level of help and connect them. You can also call EAP if it is a non-crisis situation. So if it's something where they need to talk to someone today, that they're really crying or they're really upset about something and they would really help right now if we could talk to somebody, it's fine to call EAP. We do have counselors who we kind of use an urgent care model. So you might have to wait a little bit, but there will be a counselor that can talk to them very quickly or can coach you as a leader through this situation. But again, if it is an imminent thing where you think they are going to hurt themselves or someone else, do not call EAP. That's not appropriate. It's calling 911. So just in summary again, regarding you as a leader, it's not your place to determine if a person has mental illness or any other medical illness going on. We're going to refer to the authorities and professionals on that, on making sure they're okay and that if there's anything more that they need. Trying to be as respectful and confidential about anything that you see going on, and to keep it limited to what's going on in the workplace. So if the person is able to do their job, they're able to follow through and communicate with other people or customers or whatever it is, then it's really not your role to intervene. But if you are starting to see things slip or performance issues, you're addressing them in that light, not trying to figure out what the core reason is for it. Something that you can talk about with your HR folks is if a person might ask for a reasonable accommodation, that's something they specifically have to ask for. And sometimes there can be accommodations made for mental health, but just a reminder that anything that is done, it does not have to include anything that is outside of what you as a company can provide, or something that is going to cause undue hardship for anyone within the workplace. They still have to be able to do their job. I mentioned before, using the sometimes speech is a nice opener to, sometimes people struggle with some things in their personal life. Sometimes people struggle with mental health issues that can really affect their ability to perform their job. I don't know if that's something that's true for you, but I want to remind you that we have the Employee Assistance Program. It's free, it's confidential. It's somebody that would help walk you through and help you decide, is there something more that you need that could help you with your job, or whatever else is maybe bleeding over into your job that's from your personal life. So in summary, you as a leader are going to be addressing any of these mental health things as a more workplace performance issue, measurable things that you can actually see that are not happening, offering them the EAP and reminding them all the resources that are available there. If needed, talking with your HR folks about if there's accommodations or ways that you can work with this employee or not around whatever accommodation they might need. and building in some of these things into the performance improvement plan if that's something that's needed. So as I mentioned, being able to mandate certain sessions of EAP if that's something that's helpful. So this is good on so many levels because it is allowing you to put the employee first and give them every benefit of the doubt and to try to support them in the best way that you can, that they can get back to their job and do a good job for you. Also, it allows you to make a paper trail to say that you have done everything that you possibly could if and when the time comes that you might have to part ways with this employee. The employee doesn't have to disclose the problem to you. They also don't have to tell you if they're getting treatment. But again, their performance is definitely within your purview. So hopefully today, I talked really quickly, I know. We did a good review of some of the things about mental illness that you may have heard or known, and some good reminders about the prevalence of it, that it really is impacting our communities greatly, which means that it's obviously impacting our workplaces, and that you have a very, very challenging role as a leader to navigate both sides of that, of being compassionate and obviously caring about the individuals that work for you, but also needing to run a business and to meet goals and to provide a service for your customers. So balancing those boundaries and also wearing all those hats can be really challenging. And I would ask you again, if you think there is something that we could do to support you as a leader to problem solve or team build or work with an employee who's struggling, or to work with more than one employee that is not getting along, or whatever it is that maybe that we could help you, that we would be willing to do that. And I thank you again. I hope that you will go and check out our website. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to call us. So there's really no stupid questions. There's no thing that's too small. If we don't know the answer, we'll tell you. But I appreciate this time today, and I'll stay on for just a few minutes if there's anybody that has a specific question that you want to share.